towards the end of last week, African leaders made headlines in Moscow, and not just in Moscow, it's basically across the globe. And of course, you may wonder why this is. It's because 7 African presidents attended the Victory Day celebrations in Moscow, which was on 9th May, and it was to mark the 80th anniversary of the defeat of the Nazi Germany in the World War II. So Victory Day, of course, celebrates the surrender of the Nazi Germany, which ended the World War II. But the presidents, the issue is not the 80th day, it's the fact that African presidents made it to attend. So the presidents in attendance were 7 in total, and they include Burkina Faso's. Of course, by now, you know, Burkina Faso's president is like topping any African, Pan-Africanist conversations. So the African presidents who are in attendance include Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traore, the guy that everyone in the world is looking at as the top Pan-Africanism, or has hope that he will lead his country to what the dream was for Burkina Faso. Then there was Egypt's Abdel Fattah Sisi was present, Guinea-Bissau's Umaro Sissoco Embalo was in, Equatorial Guinea's Teodoro Obiang Nguema was in, Zimbabwe's Emerson Mnangagwa. This is actually not his first time also to go for the Russian convention. He was there last year. Congo Brazzaville, the president, who's Denis Sassou Nguesso, was also present. And finally, Ethiopia's Taye Atseke Selassie. Of course, in Ethiopia, you know, the president is technically not the most powerful because the prime minister is the more recognized leader of the nation. So those are the 7 presidents that were present. So the presence of these African leaders symbolize the strong and growing ties between Africa and Russia. And of course, this is rooted in the historical solidarity that Russia stood with Africa even during the colonial period, mutual respect and shared opposition to Western dominance. And why it's this? Because some of these nations and the presidents are the ones who stood up against colonialists now and in the past. So what was of course, many people are questioning why would it be important for African leaders to attend, or rather, what is the benefit for Africa and Russia in this attendance? Number one, it is a recognition of Russia as a trusted and reliable partner. What does this mean? Of course, this projects power across the geopolitical space because, you know, the Westerners have been dominant in Africa across. Well, in West Africa, we've seen them kicked out in different countries like Burkina Faso. So having Traore there, it's a projection of power for Russia to the geo-national space that, you know what, you guys have been kicked out, but we are a good friend, we are reliable, and actually these presidents trust us. Number two, it's an improvement or growth of the diplomatic relations, of course, moves and a yielding of soft power, because now we see a lot of these presidents. This means that they have trust in Russia. So it means the diplomatic relations are becoming better. This is also expected to build a strategic alliance and support for free states. Free states in the sense that Africa generally as a continent has been held so much by the colonial powers. I mean, we are independent, the 54 countries in Africa, very independent. But in terms of how we operate, we are tied by the colonial masters for different aspects and for their different interests. So this is a step towards building a strategic alliance and support of free states in Africa. So the possible conversations that are coming out of this, of course, military negotiations, economic transactions, and of course, it's a whole thing of Africa wanting to pull away from the neocolonialism ideology of independence. So how I look at it, I feel like every time African leaders are invited to such spaces, we must, or rather the leaders must plan in advance so that when they are called to attend to such events, then we know why we are attending. You know, going to Russia is amazing. It was a good thing attending. But then, of course, we question, did they get the target for which they sat for these bilateral discussions? The ideas they left with Africa with while going to Russia, were they actualized at the table? So it's very important for leaders to ensure by the time they're going to the table, they have their desires or needs put straight up and they can stand up by them so that by the time these conventions and agreements are being signed, then Africa is getting what it deserves. So some of the the interesting events that happened was the president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, he made headlines in Moscow. It's actually not just in Moscow, it's across the world again, because this is, I think, the second time he was seen attending a presidential event with his gun standing, rather the pistol, stalled to the waist. Openly, he didn't even hide it. So, which some of the analysts that look at this say this is a sign of radiating strength, pride, and the African defiance. Because traditionally, African leaders don't attend these events with the attire of, army attire at any one point, even for the ones who've been in the army. Number two, African presidents are usually very well suited, like looking all West suited to attend these events. So for him to go to this level at this, it just shows the defiance that Africa is taking and the self-belief and trust that Africa is developing in itself. So that was one of the key highlights of the events. In fact, the Venezuelan president, who was also attending, expressed admiration and joy in meeting Traore. Traore, of course, has become a global icon of African strength. And it's interesting that the president, who was saying that he was excited to meet him, the guy of Venezuela, his country has also been sanctioned, just like Burkina Faso has been sanctioned by the West. So when you have leaders who are welcoming people who've been sanctioned by the West, and leaders who believe in what they stand for their countries, then that's a win for Africa, in my opinion. In fact, I feel like other African leaders should be taking lessons from Ibrahim Traore. So a day after the parade, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, held bilateral talks with the African leaders, and some of the key things he discussed were economic issues, security, and political cooperations. So the bilateral agreements are kind of battering natural, like doing a barter trade with, if we give you this, then we can get this. So for Africa, of course, it's natural resources in exchange for military equipment, modern weaponry to help in the enduring the capacity of fighting the Islamic attacks that keep happening, especially in West Africa region, and basically terrorism in the region, which has been big for the African space. So in his speech, President Putin, in his ideas of how they can work with Zimbabwe, he said that both countries are geared towards building a multipolar world order, and they are very good on working. Their relations in terms of bilateral cooperation are growing very well, and he was very happy and looking forward to building that more. Russia and Burkina Faso, his take was that they are key in helping Burkina Faso fight terrorism, suppress the radical groups that, of course, the jihadists that have been thrown in Burkina Faso, and of course, restore constitutional order. I like that he acknowledges that, of course, Ibrahim is not an elected president, and that's why he was key to note that they are working towards restoring constitutional order. Remember, Burkina Faso extended the ruling of Traore for the next 5 years. So, and after that, hopefully by the time the 5 years are elapsing, then the country will hold its elections to just restore order in that nation. It is with Traore, it looks like order has come, and from the things we read, that's good progress. Hopefully, when they get now to civilian rule, it will even be better. So for Traore, his request was that they get exchange for technology, experience, education, and research for his people. He actually spoke so passionately about Russia training his own people in the different fields that he mentioned, especially on research and education, because he feels that his country is at a point where these skills are very vital and will help the nation improve. So on Zimbabwe, Putin had mentioned they have a lot of cooperation on training of students in Russian universities, supply of grains and fertilizer, which has helped in agriculture. And he said that they are working towards more progress on improving these ones. So you see, these nations, from what happened, I feel like Russia is treating these nations as partners and not as beggars. Because you see, they're looking at ways of partnering and delivering for the people. And the presidents are actually leading the call for their own people. Now, it is up to these presidents to ensure that this is implemented. So the Russia-African relations, from this, what is to read, it is that Africa is now being treated not as a guest or a beggar at the table, but actually a continent not in need of saving, but of recognition. And some of the key things you look at, it's how the presidents were treated when they got to Moscow. Look at how Traore was received, the mode of transport they were given, and then compare that to when African leaders were attending some event and they were all bundled in some bus like school-going children. And I remember the president of Kenya calling on African leaders to now stand up and stand against such form of treatment.
And sometimes we are mistreated.
Because they felt belittled, which, of course, in my opinion, I think they were. I mean, if the Westerners really respect them, I don't think they would have treated them and just bundled them in one bus like school-going kids. So when you look at how they were treated there vis-a-vis how they are treated in Russia, you can tell the difference. You can tell where there is respect, mutual respect, and maybe a desire for a better Africa for us. I mean, nobody is coming to save Africa, but there is always sign of people who respect you. You don't need to ask much. From this feels like it's a rebirth of Pan-Africanism in a way, and I hope the African leaders can actually choose unity over competition. Can the leaders hack this? I mean, it's something we as Africans are watching and hoping that these leaders we put in power will actually work more towards uniting Africa than competing to see who gets more friends in the West or what, rather than have unity whereby when they go to negotiate for deals or for in terms of relations, then Africa gets better as a continent and not just one country feeling they're better than the other. So in my conclusion, I feel like this exemplifies a noticeable friendship and solidarity with Africa. And of course, in totality, Africa's leaders' presence, this underscores the reaffirmed and long-standing historical bilateral ties. Most importantly, maybe Russia is consistently renewing its commitment and enhancing relations with Africa as an equal partner, not as a subject, vis-a-vis how we have been treated by the Western world. Most of the times, Africa has just been, a country that is, a continent that is coming to beg and look for help. And that's why when President Trump decided to cut aid, then it destabilized the whole continent. I mean, I feel like it is time for African leaders to wake up, realize that Africa can stand up for its own, has its rights, and a continent that is capable by itself. However, of course, because we can't exist as an island, it is good that we build good relations with other people who treat us well. And from this, I feel like this is one of the nations that is treating Africa how we ought to be treated. Can leaders work towards that? We will only sit and watch, but hopefully we become better at it. Thank you for watching. Share what you think about the leaders that you saw in Russia and how you felt about that whole thing, vis-a-vis how it happened on the other side. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next episode. The world is fast-paced and sometimes you miss the action. What perspectives do you have? What is the truth? Is the world at war? Join me, Sarah Mwangi, as we make sense of the information overload.